So I had a video for this week. It was all filmed, it was all uploaded, it was ready to go, and um, my computer decided to develop a personality this week, and I don't really know what it's doing, but it's having fun. Um, and so I figured it was probably better to just film a different video and worry about that one later. Um, So I wanted to talk about something I mentioned in last week's video, which is men who think that they've fallen in love with you in strip clubs. I mentioned that a couple guys actually have been under the impression that they were in love with me. And that wasn't like a humble brag, like, oh my God, sometimes guys fall in love with me. That's just part of the job. Like, if you are an exotic dancer, sooner or later, some guy is going to think that he has fallen in love with you, which does not mean that he has fallen in love with you. That's not the same thing. I was really tempted to title this video, and I might still title it this. Strippers aren't real people. And I'm sure that's going to offend a lot of people if I write it that way, but that's kind of what it is. When you, as a customer, go into a strip club and you meet a stripper, you're not meeting a real person. You're meeting a series of illusions that the two of you have crafted together. So when you meet the stripper, you're looking at her and you're seeing what you want to see. Like, first of all, you're seeing probably a very beautiful, very attractive woman, and you're also envisioning her as whatever you think she's going to be like or whatever you want her to be like. So you're not actually getting a very clear idea of who she is as a person. You're seeing this lovely idea of who she is. And I've got some funny stories about that, actually. Anyway, also, I mean, that's one thing. That's one complication when you meet a stripper. But then there's also the fact that she's trying to sell you dances. She's trying to make money off of you. So she's trying to portray herself as whatever she thinks you're going to like. And so she's going to act like something. She's going to act like someone who's attractive, and she's going to try and get a feel for what you like just by talking to you. And she's going to keep pushing that idea that she is this attractive person. So a lot of girls are really seductive. I'm not particularly seductive, but I do a really good, or I did for a long time, a really good kind of girl next door, sweet little Midwestern girl kind of thing, where I could be, sweet and innocent and, kind of charming. A lot of guys said that I was the kind of girl that they'd want to go out and have a beer with. I don't drink beer, but they didn't necessarily need to know that. Everybody has their niche. Everybody has things that they fall into a little bit better than others. Like, some girls were really good at doing like dominatrix stuff. Some guys really went into that. I don't think it was as much a mainstream thing, but the guys who did go for it really went for it, so it could still be lucrative. But beyond having your act that you put out, you have this performance that you're giving to a guy, and then he has all these ideas about who you might be. When you combine those two things together, you're not actually talking to a real person when you're talking to an exotic dancer. You're talking in many ways just to an illusion. And that can be interesting. Like, I remember there was this one guy, he bought an hour-long dance from me. It was a very expensive dance. And we got into the back room, and I sat down with him, and I started talking to him. He told me about something he was interested in, and I can't even remember what it was. I was interested in that thing too, so I was all excited. I was like, me too, oh my gosh, because not many people were interested in whatever it was. I really don't remember. And I was so excited. I was like, this is a thing not a lot of people are interested in. He's interested in it. I'm interested in it. We could talk about this all hour. This is awesome. This is going to be easy money for me. I can spend the next hour talking with this dude about stuff that I think is interesting. And right away, he's like, no, you don't. I was like, yeah, I do. He's like, no, you're just telling me that. And I was like, no, I mean, I'm actually genuinely interested in this thing, and I was kind of excited that you were interested in it too. He's like, no, you're not. And I was like, okay, then what are we going to talk about? Because you know, it's going to be a really long hour if we're not talking to each other. And I remember like this guy, he just got annoyed with me. Anytime I found something fun or exciting or sexual that we could talk about, that we had in common, or that, you know, would be fun or entertaining to talk about with somebody, he would shut me down right away and say, oh no, you're not actually interested in that. Oh no, you don't actually feel that way. Oh no, that's not really you. And then he got mad at me after a while because I was, you know, lying to him. And he got up and he stormed out of the dance room, which, you know, honestly saved me about 45 minutes of uncomfortable dancing. Because he was so unpleasant. Like, it was so good to see him go. It was like, there's no refund, so the money was mine and he was gone. Life was good. But I remember that. Like, I think that if you go into a strip club with the assumption that girls are just going to lie their asses off to you to try and get your money, you're not going to have a very good time. But you do have to keep in the back of your mind that whenever you meet a stripper in a strip club, you know, as a customer, you're not going to meet necessarily a person. There's always going to be that illusion that stands in between you and the girl that you're talking to. And everything gets filtered through that illusion. And part of that is not just the girl. Part of that is going to be you as a dude. And so that's a good thing to know. And if you do know that, don't let it spoil your time. You know, definitely enjoy the fantasy. That's what you're there for. Strip club is a place where you can, like, I've had so many young guys who walk in and they're like, you know, why should I look at you when I could just go home and watch porn on my computer for free? And it's like, well, number one, you can't actually touch the porn on your computer that you're watching for free. You can't talk to the porn that you're watching for free on your computer. And also, this is a place where there are live entertainers. This is live entertainment that you're getting. You pay for that because you're interacting with actual people. Now, if you want to go watch the same porn video that like 3 million other dudes have, you know, watched, you know, go do that, but don't be bothering me in my place of business. So that was always kind of interesting to me. I never really understood that logic, and I think that's part of the reason I think sometimes the exotic dance industry is eventually just going to die, because everybody wants, they want free pornography, and that's not what we do. We sell a fantasy. You know, you get to go to a strip club, you get to meet your dream girl, and you get to talk with her and laugh with her and flirt with her and sit on a really tacky but, you know, kind of extravagant looking couch somewhere, and, you know, drink with her and enjoy her company for however long you're willing to pay for. And then you can get up and go home and you have that fantasy with you. Maybe it's not necessarily the sort of thing you would spend money on, but there are a lot of guys who would spend money on that. You know, you get to meet really beautiful girls. I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about, you know, there are all sorts of really pretty girls in strip clubs. Like, okay, I remember, like, strip clubs tend to collect a variety of different sizes, shapes, ethnicities. Variety is the spice of life, and guys have different tastes. And so some guys like tall women, some guys like short women, some guys like, you know, women with lots of cleavage, some guys like women with very little cleavage. And I remember there was this one guy, and it was so sweet. He was very attracted to this one woman. He was a white man, and he was very attracted to a black dancer. And what happened was I went up to him and I asked him if he wanted to dance. He was like, I'm sorry, you're really not my type. I was like, oh, that's cool. What is your type? We've got redheads, we got brunettes, we got blondes, we've got tall women, we've got short women, you know, we've got black girls, we've got Asian girls, we've got white girls, we got everything here. So, you know, what are you into? I will find that girl, I will bring her to you, and you can get a dance with her, because then somebody's making money, even if I'm not. And he very, very shyly had pointed out this girl to me. And I was like, she's beautiful. I'll go get her for you. And he's like, no, you can't do that. And I was like, why not? He's like, oh, you know, I can't. And, you know, she was selling a dance to another guy, and she got out of her dance with the other guy, and she stopped at the doorway, and he and I were standing next to it, the doorway of the dance room. And he's kind of looking at her really, really shyly, really afraid of her. And I just put my hand on the small of his back and started pushing him toward her. And he walked toward her like this guy in a trance. Like he couldn't turn around and run away, but he didn't know what else to do. So he's just kind of drifting toward her. And she asked him if he wanted to dance, and he said yes. And shortly afterward, I saw the two of them going to the back room, like where the big, long, expensive dances are. It wasn't like there was anything perverse going back there, because I was back there a lot. It was just a larger, grander, prettier, a little bit more private, so you could like sit down and have a conversation. And the two of them were going off there, and I was just so happy for him, and I was happy for her. Like, she was making a lot of money, and he actually got to spend some time with the girl that he was really, really interested in. But that's what a strip club is. It's a fantasy. And I mean, it can be a fun fantasy, it can be a very nice fantasy, but when you're talking to a dancer, she's not going to be anything substantially more than a fantasy. You might have great conversations, you might have interesting conversations. I would hesitantly wager that the more interesting the conversation, the more likely it is that you're talking to the person and not just the stripper. I remember there were some guys where we would get into conversations and the conversations were actually interesting, and I mean, I was on my own schedule, so I just sit with a guy for like hours, sometimes like 4 hours easy, and I talk with him and talk with him and talk with him, and you know, nobody really cared as long as I paid the club their money. And so I could sit down with a customer who was particularly interesting and just talk with him for, you know, 4 hours at a time and not get a single penny from him if I wanted to do that. I wouldn't recommend going into a strip club and expecting the girls to do that. They will be very angry at you. But it does happen occasionally, just kind of on its own. That doesn't mean that I was necessarily attracted to these guys either. They just had interesting things to say and I wanted to hear what they were talking about. But on those occasions, I think it's safe to say that the fantasy and the illusion slipped a little bit. So the things that I told them were less fictional as time passed and as the conversation went on. But there was still a lot of fiction in there. I was always single in the strip club. Like, whenever I was telling anybody anything about my life, it's like, oh yeah, I'm single. Sometimes I had a roommate. Like when I met my husband and the two of us were living together, and when we got married and everything, I had a roommate. And I had to be very careful because I was way too tempted to talk about my imaginary roommate too much. It's like, you know, yes, my imaginary roommate is a girl, but if I talk about my imaginary roommate like they're a lover, people are going to think I'm a lesbian. They're not going to want to give me money because they're not going to think that I'm going to, you know, be particularly receptive to their romantic advances. The truth was my lesbian roommate was mostly just my husband. With a lot of fiction, you know, thrown in there for, you know, just kind of even out the story and make it all flow nicely. I mean, we lie to customers. That's kind of the job. And that doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't go to a strip club and you shouldn't enjoy the fantasy. It's just you have to realize that when you go home, the woman you talk to evaporates and she's gone. And she's not out there somewhere waiting for you to call her or, you know, possibly have dinner with her or anything like that. She's gone because she never existed. And the girl you thought you were talking to, you know, whoever she is, she goes into the back room and she takes off her makeup and she puts her high heels in a, you know, in like a duffel bag, and she goes home, and she has who even knows what kind of life at home. You know, I've known strippers who were housewives with kids. It's not that horribly uncommon. It happens. And so, you know, you would never imagine that of, what's a good name for her, you know, Candy or whatever her name is. You wouldn't imagine that of her. She's single, right? She lives on her own. She's working her way through nursing school. She's, you know, this wonderful girl. She's kind of witty and funny and clever. She's got this artistic streak, but she's also practical because she's going to become a nurse. And she's not who you think she is. She isn't real. You know, Candy is actually some girl named, okay, now I gotta find a Susan. Some girl named Susan who's like, you know, she's definitely not in college, but, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean she's wasting her life either. Maybe she's married, maybe she's engaged, maybe she only has a boyfriend, maybe she's single. Maybe she's, you know, an actress or an aspiring actress, although usually the aspiring actresses I met, they usually were pretty vocal about that. They were, you know, they were dancers, but they were also actresses, and they were always telling their customers, well, I'm an actress. Okay. You know, maybe she's, I mean, who knows? She's a person. She's a person you never met. But, you know Candy. And Candy probably acts the same way with most of the guys she meets. She's probably got this overarching, you know, persona that she plays when she's at work. But Candy evaporates the moment she walks out of a strip club. So, you know, it's good to know, because I do hear stories about guys who like think they were in love with the dancers. And I, of course, I had one regular who thought he was in love with me. It was not a good thing. I never took another regular after that. Like, that was it. That was when I realized it was all bad for me. Like, I'm not good with regulars. Maybe some people are, but I can't necessarily do that. But yeah, strippers are interesting because when you're a customer, you're not necessarily meeting a person. You're meeting a fantasy. An embodied fantasy, which is really cool and really fun. But, you know, if you're that guy who's always falling in love with the stripper, she's not a real person, man. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later.